Okay, good morning, everyone. Uh, Today we will spend some time together as a part of global Gen Culture event. Before starting my presentation, let me briefly introduce myself. I am Aras Bozkurt, an associate professor of distance education at Anadolu University, Turkey. And today I will talk about open learning ecologies for sustainability. Let's start with exploring some basic concepts to keep on answering some basic questions. Question one, what is learning? If we provide a simple and alternative definition for learning, we can say that there is knowing, known, and action between these two parties, and learning is the action when these parties interact. However, in contrast to what is argued in many books, learning is not merely a cognitive process. Learning, in fact, is a social process, and we need a space to socially facilitate it. Question two, where learning happens. Currently, the main assumption is that learning happens at school, university, or in places that write education institution on the side. This assumption accepts that learning only happens in formal, walled, predefined spaces. Let's now explore aquarium metaphor. Imagine that you are a fish living and swimming in an aquarium. As a fish, your world is a tiny aquarium, and what you can learn is limited, the depth and width of the aquarium. On the other hand, there is also an ocean, which means that the world, as you know, is not so tiny, and further means that there is a lot to learn. To do this, we have to accept the reality that learning is beyond formal spaces. True learning for a fish happens out of the aquarium. It happens in the oceans. This means that we have to explore ocean, which is the ecology for a fish. And to do this, we have to extend our learning to non-formal and informal spaces. Learning is social, situated, contextual, and more importantly, authentic. And therefore, what we face in the learning ecologies is important. If formal, non-formal, and informal spaces emphasize the need for a learning ecology, this means that we need to identify what a learning ecology is. I hope you are not bored so far and ready to explore the concept of learning ecology. Now, it's time to explore what a learning ecology is. Accordingly, learning ecologies are spaces where we socially interact with living and non-living entities and project ourselves as lifelong learners. In learning ecologies, we can form and develop communities to enhance our learning experiences. Through an ecological view, we are able to interpret learning ecologies as spaces that are adaptive, self-developing, self-organizing, where we can collaborate, cooperate, negotiate, create, and share. Such a view also supports the idea that these spaces are complex, chaotic, and the progress is nonlinear. Now, please focus on the image on this slide. What makes this scene significant and beautiful? I will give you some seconds before explaining my thoughts. Yep, 5 seconds is full. I'm sure there are probably different answers to this question, but based on the feelings I got, I would say openness makes the view significant and harmony makes it beautiful. As I stated, two concepts are important in our context. The first one is harmony. Harmony means that everything is working as supposed to be and everybody has the opportunity to make the tune sound better. Like the music produced by an orchestra, harmony also represents collective decisions, collective actions, and collective purpose. Being collective further means that we have to unite and stand as a one. The second term is openness. Openness is, in fact, a relative term with many meanings, a color with many shades. Openness means keeping the back and front doors always open. The term openness is important in many aspects. First, if your ecology is open, it's a living, sustainable ecosystem. If we put it more clearly, an open ecosystem means that every living or non-living entities are accepted as a part of the ecosystem, regardless what they are or who they are. Second, such a view requires highlighting equity and equality. For a true open ecosystem that works in harmony and open for everyone, we need to get rid of prefixes, and the words inequity and inequality should be deleted from every aspect of the life, including education. Thus far, we highlighted that a true ecology is inclusive, and similarly, a true and inclusive learning happens in open learning ecologies. These visions echoed in educational landscape, and open learning strives for this purpose. The core of open education is openness. The term builds bonds with critical pedagogy, but it is also a notion with pluralistic and inclusive connotations, and a stance that defends widening participation. Throughout the history, openness has been given many meanings: equity, equality, access, flexibility, collaboration, agency, democratization, social justice, transparency, and removing barriers. However, more importantly, openness is a living idea that inspires open education. Because openness is a living thing, its definition continues to evolve and become loaded with many more meanings. In 1981, Wedemeyer, one of the leading scholars in the field of open education, identified the importance of open and distance learning for widening access for different groups of non-traditional learners. And he noted that the near urgency respecting learning signals the need for educational approaches that recognize and acknowledge the significance of non-traditional learning throughout life. Wedemeyer further argues that it is important to keep the back door open for those who are vulnerable to these unequal developments. As you remember, I had noted that collective decisions and collective actions are important to envision a world in harmony for an ecology guided by equality and equity. For an inclusive and sustaining learning ecology, we need openness philosophy, and open education shares these visions. Motivated by the same sense, nearly all countries in the world have promised to improve the planet and the lives of its citizens by 2030. They have committed themselves to 17 life-changing goals outlined by the United Nations in 2015 as a part of 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which is set out a 15-year plan to achieve these goals. These global goals, also known as the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, include ending extreme poverty, giving people better health care, achieving equality for women, and ensuring quality education for all by reducing inequality and inequity. The aim is for all countries to work together collectively in harmony to ensure no one is left behind. SDG 4 is labeled Quality Education, and its goals intend to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. Okay, don't panic, I won't read all the items on the slide. There are a total of 10 goals dedicated to SDG 4. SDG 4 assumes that learning is inclusive and further promotes non-formal and informal learning as well as formal learning. A close examination of these goals indicate that the core of SDG 4 is equity, equality, and social justice. These core elements are also core values of open education, and therefore we need to support open education initiatives. More importantly, referring to Wedemeyer's metaphor, rather than seeing open education as a back door, we have to see it as a front door, as a part of mainstream education to sustain education and promote lifelong learning. SDG 4 suggests a set of goals for a sustainable development and for a better world. It is quite obvious that SDG 4 shares the same vision with open education, which are promoting lifelong learning that cover formal, non-formal, and informal spaces, forming and nurturing learning ecologies where equity, equality, and social justice are ensured, and finally, ensuring open learning with multiple entry points, ensuring flexibility. Before saying my final words, I need to refer to COVID-19 and the main takeaways emerged with the pandemic. What Jim Wallis says perfectly illustrates what happened during the COVID-19 crisis. He says, sometimes it takes a natural disaster to reveal a social disaster. In this regard, we can say that COVID-19 pandemic was more than a crisis. In fact, it was a wake-up call for everyone. We knew that the inequalities and inequities were already available, but they became more visible with the pandemic. In this sense, we have to ask that question to ourselves. How can we turn this crisis to an opportunity? If we can work in harmony, we can take collective decisions and collective actions to create an open learning ecology which is informed and empowered by equity, equality, and social justice. To create a sustainable learning ecology, we have to start from now on by removing barriers. Do you remember the little tiny fish that I introduced at the beginning of this presentation? I have told you that we will meet with that fish again. In fact, that fish was both presenting lifelong learners and the information we can access in a learning ecology. In this sense, we can start by letting that tiny little fish swim in the ocean, by liberating information and creating an open, democratic learning ecology where we are guided by equity, equality, and social justice, not for few, but for everyone. Thank you for being here and listening to me. Please do not hesitate to communicate for further queries and discussions. I need a few more minutes to explain our activity. As you know, there will be activities that we can collectively engage in. I want to explain one of the activities in brief. Um, Today, we highlighted that being together, taking collective decisions and collective actions can make difference. In this regard, I would like to introduce you Together activity, originally created by Chrissy and some other friends from different parts of the globe. During the week, in this open education activity, you will have the chance to create your own OER using as a inspiration to picture the book to create your own versions in multiple languages and forms. You can remix the artwork and retell the story your own way by your own imagination. And more details will be explained here, and there are also more information on Microsoft Teams. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to jump very briefly in. Sorry, Sravansi, just because we have Gino here from the team, and I think it might be very useful for him to very briefly explain the activity, and then we'll go back to Aras and Sravansi. If that's okay. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you, Chrissy.
Thank you, Chrissy, and thank you, Aras, for
Hello,
a wonderful talk. I found it really interesting. Just a quick something. The project is called Together, but it's falling underneath a fellowship that Chrissy was able to secure from the Global Open Education Resources Graduate Network, which is an amazing, I'd say, strategic opportunity for you to get involved in postgraduate level open education activities. So this is the Goji in picture book, and the picture book really tells the story of the values of open, which I think Aras put out so beautifully there as something that's really about social justice and about ensuring that access to education is not just at the back, but coming from the front. And when we think about something coming from the front, I think that language represents that accessibility most often. And if you can tell a story in your own language, it means that you can add richness, depth, complexities to it. So the Goji in picture book story tries to get the values of open shared in a children's storybook, which is something that's also a new and innovative way to start sharing what open is and what it could be. So what we'd like for people to do across this week is to engage with the story. We've got a Doodle fan page where you are able to create your own home language version of the story, embedding it into the graphics and making it accessible to people all around the world. We've got several versions of the book already translated, and you are able to look at all of these, but more importantly, you are able to add and then share. So we are so excited, and thank you for the opportunity just to speak so briefly about this. We present tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. UK time. So please join us and find out how you can add richness to the world of open. Thank you.